Arvest Bank is a proud sponsor for today's Fresco El Podcast.
Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Fresco El Podcast. I'm Luis Padilla, and today I'm deeply honored and excited to welcome a leader whose resilience, dedication, and love for the city has really taken Kansas City to new heights. Since taking office, he has faced many challenges, earned national recognition for his leadership, and overseen some of the most significant years of growth in the city's modern history. Welcome, Mayor Quinton Lucas.
It is great to be with you. Hello, everybody. Excited, maybe a little nervous to be on this podcast. I'm gonna try to be good.
No, thank you for being here, taking the time. I know that we just have one of the biggest winter storm in the last decade of Kansas City, so I know you're pretty busy, but thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. It has been a big winter storm. It was our biggest snowfall since 1993. When I was a kid in school in Kansas City. I'm proud of how we've bounced back. This is for people who are watching later. This is 2 days after the storm.
Yep.
The whole crew is here. Everybody looks good. You aren't wearing raggedy clothes. I'm just proud of how we all got it together.
Yeah, I know, and and thank you to all the city staff because in the city is back and back on it and
right.
full and running and you stuff like you say in 2 days.
That's right.
So let's get. I know you're busy agenda, so let's get to it. I'm gonna ask you a question that maybe a lot of people have asked you already, but since we're here, I want to see maybe you answer differently this time. Mm-hmm. If you could time travel, if you have a time machine, where would you go and why?
I mean, I'm not going to cheat and say the future, because part of me wants to go. I'll be 50 years in the future, see what my kids are up to, see what everything's happening. But
right.
That would be a fun one. But let me go back to the past because people really want to know what era would I pick. This morning I was reading about the late 1960s and social activism. And no matter the type of activism, every cause, every issue, you had a lot of people who were out making changes in the world. I would love for society to still be in that role, that mission of saying, how can we do better for everybody? So I would probably, put me in 1969, get me a bald-headed afro, which everybody used to have, right? You still have all the hair on the side,
Yeah.
but give me that, the styles, and more than anything, I would love to make a difference in our community.
Yeah, well, I think you're making a difference in our community nowadays, and like I say, there's now in recent years in Kansas City, in the period that you've been the mayor, we have some incredible growth and different developments happening in the West Bottoms and the riverfront, affordable housing, and on top of that, new airport, a streetcar. Super Bowls, the Royals back on playoffs.
Well, that's probably been the nicest little surprise. The cherry on top was that the Royals were good again this year. I actually was able to make it to one of their playoff games at Yankee Stadium. So I'm there in New York and looking at the Royals, and they actually won that game. And I was just kind of like, what a time to be in Kansas City. I grew up here, spent most of my life here, of course, at this point. And just seeing people excited about all the different things in a lot of areas over the years that we had forgotten. The West Bottoms was just haunted houses for a lot of my upbringing and us largely abandoning what was then Kemper Arena. The riverfront was a dumping ground when I was born. The fact that you were talking about billions of dollars of economic development going into those areas, I think means a lot for Kansas City. Our sports teams are reinvigorated. We have a new owner for the Country Club Plaza. You're seeing us build affordable housing on the east side of Kansas City. And frankly, you're seeing repopulation of the historic Northeast on Independence Avenue and areas around it. So I think this is a great time to be in Kansas City. I'm excited to see what comes ahead.
Yeah. I mean, the exciting times ahead. Yes.
Right.
And you mentioned the east side, so I want to go back to the beginnings.
Yeah.
And so tell us, who is Quinton Lucas? Where do you grow up? How was your childhood like?
Yeah. It's I think about it sometimes because you get asked questions and in politics, they teach you to answer them in like 20 seconds. So you say some things that I don't ever think give the full picture. So I appreciate the time. I was raised by a mother, raised me on her own, never met my father in my life. And I'm youngest of three. I have two older sisters. But I had an amazing upbringing. I mean, it had challenges, but challenges make things fun, right?
Yep.
All of us knew challenges. All of us knew some adversity to being who we are today. Probably my most interesting thing, I've always been a bit of a nerd. When I was young, I tried to fight it. but now I just lean in and it's all good, right? It's amazing what getting older will do for you. But I was always into libraries for a few different reasons. One, I like books. I like knowledge. When I was a kid, there wasn't the internet. So, all y'all kids out there, like there was a time we just had to like figure out stuff and look at books and magazines. So I would go to the local library. And the other cool thing was when I was growing up, we almost never had air conditioning. So the library was like nice and air conditioned. It would have like this cold water. I still remember being just there hours for that.
Right.
So, did that. When I was a kid, I actually, we lived in an area by the name of Hutchinson, Kansas for a while. So I was born in Kansas City. My mom says Kansas City's too tough. My uncle says you should go to Central Kansas where nothing wild happens. He was right. And then we did about 5 years there. Moved back to Kansas City. My mom sent me to a private school on the edge of the city, which was kind of an interesting thing for me. So I'd lived at that point in the inner city of Kansas City. We continue to live in the inner city. But then also kind of in more rural Kansas. And the suburbs were a totally different, they're still a different place for me. But did 10 years of school there, got a wonderful education, still ran track, which was kind of my sport. Men of similar heights we are. Either you're good at soccer or track or something. I can't do gymnastics. Maybe that's an option too. But nonetheless, did that. Went on to college in St. Louis. Law school was in New York State.
And so do you think growing up in the East Side shaped your perspective?
Yeah,
of life?
for sure, man. There are a few different things. If you know Kansas City, then what you recognize is if you actually look and drive down, let's say, Linwood or 39th Street or 27th Street or 18th, the housing stock is largely the same from really the west side over to the east side. The difference in some areas is the investment. Certainly the demographics change markedly, right? If you go 18th Street, if you're at 18th near the state line, it's primarily Mexican American, right? If you're in the middle, it's well-to-do white folks, God bless them, but that's usually what it is. And then it's black almost entirely as you go further east. And what I started to see from that was, we all live in these different areas, but we don't have to be divided in how we see our community, how we see ourselves. And the craziest thing about Kansas City is we're all so close to each other, but there are such stark differences in very short geography. Right. And that probably got me thinking from a young age about, well, how can we bridge those divides? How can we make it better so that somebody who's living at 31st and Prospect has the same opportunity as somebody 31st and Southwest Trafficway?
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I think, like right now, I've seen the city and all these different projects that we've been talking about, like how to connect in the communities. Mm-hmm. And like recently we work on this project in the transportation study on the Southwest Boulevard, but there's others, like trying to connect all these different demographics. And like you said, right. Kansas City is like we all together.
And if I could say this for politics of major American cities, and our city is no exception. The story of the 80s and 90s, if you go back to the mayors of that era, it was largely the cities were working mainly for one set of people. And then they started saying, okay, now we're going to do something for the west side or the east side. But it would usually be a one-off. It would be, hey, we're going to name this building after someone. We're going to do this thing or that thing. All right, cool. I mean, you need some representation. That's good. I think what we are trying to do today is say, how do we fundamentally make a difference on how people live, how they can get around, what their community looks like? So what I've liked the most, and when you mentioned Southwest Boulevard, it meant something to me. We have grants not just for I-35 on the west side, but 71 Highway on the east side. This idea of how can we make this whole city safer to traverse for somebody? How do we do the in-depth stuff? It isn't about just saying we care about black folks or Mexicans today or one day a year or something like that.
Right.
It's instead saying, how do we actually make this community one of opportunity for everyone?
Right. And how we make a difference is going to impact for years to come.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So you mentioned your mom, and was she your role model growing up?
She was inspiring to me. She continues to be inspiring to me. I have 2 children now. I'd have no idea how she raised 3 kids on her own. Part of the reason I'm a few minutes delayed today, I had to take my boys to daycare, and that's a drama when you got a toddler, if any of y'all got kids. But, she inspires me because she worked so hard every day of her life to build opportunities she's still alive, so I guess she continues to, but to create opportunities for me and my sisters.
Yeah.
And she was unwavering in that. There was this commitment to hard work that I think I got from her. There was this commitment to being part of a community even when you're not getting paid well, even when you're experiencing homelessness, housing insecurity. It meant a lot to me. And she had this amazing pride. The other thing that I found really interesting, and it taught me about my own culture. My mother was a big reader when I was growing up, and not everybody around me was. And she loved works by Black women authors, but like poets and novelists, and it was all fiction and all of that stuff, some deep stuff, right? And we'd have in our house, Nikki Giovanni and some Alice Walker and Zora Neale Hurston and all of that. And I would be kind of like, all right, I guess I'm going to look at this too. And it gave me respect for literature that wasn't just about me, but was instead something that could teach me about a time I may not have lived in, an experience I wasn't having, but one that I should get to know. And that has stuck with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. That's and I think and because you mentioned it, like being in the library for so many hours and stuff, and I think in this podcast we have other guests, and we always talk about how like different things like that when you are a young age, you don't realize that it's gonna shape the future and the trajectory of where you go in life later on.
We talked about before this interview, we were talking about South Africa, where I had the blessing to study for a little while. I was in Cape Town. And, actually, a funny thing about my Spanish, if there are any Spanish speakers who either host this show or listen to it, a vignette that has nothing to do with anything. But when I was at the University of Cape Town, they started Spanish that year at the university. And it was so funny because they're like, hey, everyone, we're getting Spanish now. It's a very popular language. You should learn it in Africa, too. And they usually it's just French down there and some others, and obviously English. And so I took the class, and I was like really good. It was the first time I've been like the best student in this Spanish class, because every other student either spoke Afrikaans, which is like this thick Dutch, how's it, my bru? Which isn't great with a Spanish accent, and or they were like speaking African languages like Zulu or Xhosa and all of that. So I got to just be the guy who's like, absolutamente, me llamo Quinton. And then, the teacher who was from Spanish, she's like, Quinton's exceptional. What's wrong with all you kids? And then later they'd be like, man, what's going on with that? Anyway, the reason I started talking about Africa, started reading about it in the library as a kid. And when I was young, apartheid was still going, racial segregation in South Africa, all of that. And I would read about Nelson Mandela. And I remember it was probably like 1993 or 94. I tell my mom when I get back from the library, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to South Africa and just see what's up one day. And she's probably like, what's this boy about? Right? Like, I'm like, boy, you can't get to Grandview right now. All right? Like, what you talking about? You're going to Cape Town. And stuck with it and read about it, and all of that eventually made it in college. But, I think that, to your point, is exactly what happens when you start at the library and when you are able to have that type of imagination long term.
Right. I think because now as an adult, you say, like, people say traveling open your eyes and you can see other cultures and everything. But as a kid, when you don't have that possibility, reading and, like seeing movies or whatever, but like it's just open your eyes to other to be more curious about what's out there.
And it gives you such a broad-based love and respect for it. I mean, you can learn a lot from film. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking that medium. But there is something about a book that gives you like this broader background. And, the problem with movies, I mean, for example, if we were talking about movies that have been set in Mexico recently that are appealed to American audiences, right? They're disproportionately stories that I don't know give you in any way the full piece of what is going on in the country. Right. So too with every country in Africa, frankly, with a lot of domestic movies here in the U.S. too. And I've always liked books because they give you at least that better context of what's going on, what's happening beyond just like most American movies, people getting shot or making love. And that's basically all I see in movies now.
And I don't know anybody that says, oh, the movie was better than the book.
Right.
That never
very
happened.
Rare.
So, yeah.
Very rare. Yeah.
So, but you mentioned, so how do you, because I didn't know if we were going to do this in Spanish or in English, but how do you learn Spanish?
So I had this wonderful teacher, Tanya Vargas, who was my grade school teacher. So I guess my full language background, I used to have an ear for languages, even as a kid. Okay. And it's something I'm trying to get my kids to do because they're great. Right. Like my 2-year-old came home one day, he had his Spanish numbers down and all of that. I'm like, just keep going, right? Keep going. Yeah. And so, kind of took it through grade school. And I appreciate that my schools and my teachers were kind of like, this is something. But then by the time I got to middle school and high school, I had the same teacher for most of that in Spanish. I liked it. This is just kind of a nerdy thing, but like Univision was a television choice for me, and we only had like a few channels, and I was like, oh, well, if I can learn some of this language, it gives me a whole like set of options.
Right.
So I could just watch shows. The sports were great, so I could watch like. I really like boxing actually. So I know a lot of people like soccer, but I was a boxing guy, so I could actually get like more fights. And like if they're in Spanish, that's fine, and you just start to learn some stuff. I wasn't into the telenovelas, but La Locura de Amor, I still remember, was one show that my teacher liked a lot. And so I would just try to, kind of learn from there. So it was really that experience. And then I have this, and a woman taught me this once, older lady. She was like, if you ever really want to learn a language, fall in love with someone who only speaks that language. I've never quite accomplished that, but at a certain point in my trajectory through life, I dated a woman who was Mexican background, and she, for some reason, like would only speak to me in Spanish, like when we were around her place and all that stuff. And it was infuriating at first, but I'd have to like get through my problem, just like, and it sounds so basic as I was describing my issue, but it really did help me along. And visited her parents once, and it was all in Spanish. And so, that gave me some work. The hardest thing for me has been, since I've been in politics, you would think I would have had more opportunity to use it more, but I really don't. And so that's something I'm trying to get back to, particularly before we get to the World Cup in 2026.
Yeah, there's going to be definitely a lot of folks that speak Spanish. So if you ever want to go to tacos, we can speak Spanish.
Can I tell you something that helped Kansas City? I'll claim it helped us get the World Cup, but the one of the gentlemen from FIFA who came to visit us was a Spaniard. And we did a big press conference and a big event, and I think I did my opening paragraph in Spanish. And then I actually ended up seeing him a few years ago at a sporting event elsewhere. But after I did that, he was like, wow, an American mayor who's speaking a different language that is not their native tongue. He's like, very impressive. I'm like, yes, Kansas City is super international and domestic. And so I think that helped us. And Kansas City, I think, continues to build opportunities for our Spanish-speaking community. I have a huge goal in making sure we have as many opportunities as possible with that.
Yeah, definitely. No, we need Spanish opens different doors for different people.
Right. I need you to get a job at City Hall, man. I mean, we need to hire more staff all the time. He's like, City Hall don't pay me like that.
No, I'll go, but let me check with my other 5 different jobs if I have time. But I have to say that I'm guilty of learning English by falling in love with somebody that only speaks the language. When I came to Kansas City, I didn't know English. So
that's amazing. And you said you were here in 2008?
2008. So, well, this is not my podcast, but
no, we want to learn about you. It's what the viewers here for.
I graduated from high school, and I told my mom kind of like the same thing. I was like, Mom, soccer is gonna give me a scholarship. And she was like, "You're crazy." She's like, "You need to start studying."
Right.
And then it opens up, and somebody say, "Hey, you want to go to Kansas City?" And kind of like explain a little bit how the scholarship thing work. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go play 6 months and go back to Mexico, because back in the day, I wanted to be professional. Then I came here. I didn't know where Kansas City was, anything, and didn't know English. But then I fall in love, with the city and stuff. 6 months, I say, well, you know what? 1 year, I'm gonna learn more English, and then 16 years later, I'm here. So
see, look at that. Yeah, but it's amazing. I still, when we talk about that, I still my teacher, actually, I saw her in Miami a while back. She ended up moving there, but she always just would say, Quintonito, about like everything I ever did wrong. So like her voice just came up in my head again.
Quintonito.
I don't know why I was in trouble so much though.
Yeah. So you'd say you mentioned going from public school to a private school, the Barstool School.
Yep.
How do you think that shaped you personally and academically?
At the beginning it was challenging. Every student was in some way different than something I had known, right? And that is the prism of living in our city, still pretty segregated. But, my mom, and where we lived, it was all black, right? And then I knew kind of a country town in Kansas where it certainly wasn't that, but it was something on a print. And then I was going to school with kids who had like flown on a plane before, which, something, skiing, like all these other things. So that was an adjustment. But I have to say this, the educators who taught me and then ultimately my peers were exceptional. I think what I learned from that and what I wish every child had, this small class environment where they were just like, look, we will watch you. We will be on you. We will make sure you're walking out of here speaking very good Spanish. You're walking out of here randomly having taken Latin. It has some use for me now, right? And all of these other things along the way. It was an outstanding school environment, and it really did help me get to where I am today.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's I think that's going back to my experience. I think that's one of the keys that make me wanted to stay, because even if I didn't speak the language, I have people that care for me, and I was just like, here everybody in Kansas City is so nice. I was like,
no, it really is. I mean, it's amazing how much, and I'm absolutely one of those who believes in the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, it is the village that got me here. It was, look, I've worked hard, don't get me wrong, but if not for a bunch of people along the way who said, we care about what this kid is doing, we'll create this, opportunity, we'll make sure there's a librarian at the library. When I was just hanging out, it was like, you need to get a library card. And I'm like, that's all good. I'll just stand here and read books when I'm here. And she's like, no, you can take some stuff home, right? I mean, it's people like that, and this community does it again and again, and it is what makes us special.
Right, yeah, I agree. So when did you realize that you wanted to go into public service?
I always liked public service. I always thought that it was a noble calling, but I don't think I knew how to get in. Something that was interesting when I was a kid, Kansas City had its first black mayor, Emmanuel Cleaver, elected. I think that showed a lot of us that, we can do that too. So that was an interesting moment. But I think I kept getting pulled through a lot of different steps in my life. I worked on a campaign in St. Louis back in 2006. I was probably 22 years old. And, it was interesting. It was fun. But I was like, no, I'm going to go to law school. And I did. And I'm like, I'm going to become a rich lawyer, and I'm just going to send my mom some money, and that's going to be how life works, right? And life has a way of getting in the way of that. And so I ended up, after law school, rather than starting at a law firm on the East Coast, which was a fabulous opportunity that I had, I came back home. And I practiced law for a while, and I think I just saw some things that I was like, maybe my voice could be helpful here. Back in 2010 or so, the school district lost accreditation, and I thought, okay, maybe there's things that people should do about it. I lived in a city council district that I thought needed a little more love, and that's eventually what got me back. It wasn't a thought that I in any way could be some, great talent, but it was instead that, I felt like that's the passion that makes me want to go places.
Right.
And that was special to me as a lawyer, and God bless my peers in the profession. I still remember like it was yesterday. I worked on this case. We worked real hard. I made a whole bunch of money that year. And I remember on Easter Sunday, I went to my mom's house for like 15 minutes because I had to get back to work. And I was like, this isn't what inspires me.
Right.
And so I wanted to control my life, and I wanted to make sure even if I was going to work hard, they were things that in my view were making a difference in the world. And I think that happened.
Yeah. So going back to the first questions of time traveling, you wanted to make an impact.
I did.
So, yeah. So, and how does that work? Like, I always wonder, like, we have Councilman Crispin Rea here before, and I always say, like, okay, well, when you want to go, but like, do you just call somebody and say, hey, I wanna be a councilman?
Yeah.
Or
it is hard. It is hard. So yeah, it's very hard. And if I think back to it, man, it was wild. So my predecessor as mayor was Sly James. He had a staffer that I knew socially. And it was like, you want to be on a board or commission? They put me on the board of zoning adjustment. Don't worry about what they do. But to most people, it'd be kind of dull, but it was kind of interesting to me. So that got me a little bit in the bug. And then I started, I think, just showing up to some meetings for different groups and being like, hey, I'd like to, learn more. Mm-hmm. But it really is, you have to talk to people. You have to try to learn from them. You have to see if somebody will give you a shot. And then there was a 2013 campaign for a ballot issue that I was against, actually. I ended up, being part of the campaign. We were successful. That was kind of cool. And then I think I said, well, I should run for city council. And my favorite thing is, so you declare, I'm going to run for office, and you think somebody cares. And like, nobody does, right? I mean, your mom's like, oh, that's nice. You can do anything, right? Your friends are like, that's great. Yeah, you'll be president one day, whatever. But I think the real thing is like, yeah, you have to like raise money. And I still remember I thought there'd just be a reservoir of like people who donate to campaigns somewhere. Right. There is not. And what you are really, they're like, yeah, so call everybody you know. And so I'm like calling a dude from college, and I still feel bad. I got this friend who works for the National Basketball Association, very successful guy. And I called him. I said, hey, I'm running for office, man. And he's like, cute, that's great. Wonderful news. And I was like, can I have $500? And then like people get real quiet. You know, they're like, oh. And actually he was kind enough to donate. But, but you start hustling. So you try to meet people. You do meet your level of insiders, but you have to get out on the streets because you recognize campaigns aren't won on Facebook. Campaigns aren't won by the fact that you have some great endorsement from somebody. It's your hard work. And, I still feel blessed that somehow I convinced the people of Kansas City like 3 times to send me here.
Yeah. That's amazing. Do you remember your first day as a mayor?
I do.
Yeah. How was
God, I remember it like it was yesterday, brother. So I lived in an apartment at 18th and Vine. I'd lived in that same apartment since I was 24. Had mice, had a few other things, but whatever. It was my little spot. I needed to get out of Dodge, though. But anyway, but I still remember that morning, the mayor in Kansas City and cities our size, usually there's a police detail with you. So they pick me up and they come in my big SUV and get out, open the door, look like Secret Service. And I'm like, oh, Lord, who are they here for? And then they're like, good morning, Mayor. And I'm like, no, that's the old brother, right? I'm like, I'm Quinton, right? And then, I go to City Hall. Obviously, that's swearing in day. It was actually very funny. There was a councilman by the name of Brandon Ellington, and his family was doing a bunch of stuff on the east side. So I actually ended up hanging with them for the wildest party ever. That's all I'll say about that. But, they were having fun at 8 a.m. And then, got to work. And I still remember when I got to City Hall, at that point, we've gotten better. But at that point, the previous mayor and I were not close. Okay. And he had endorsed someone else. And so, we didn't talk a lot during the transition. So I showed up to the mayor's office for the first time. I'd been there in a while, and it was just empty. And I was just like, okay, I guess I got to get to work. And we had like folding chairs, some other furniture. But we got to work. I'd been on the city council, so I knew what a city council meeting was like. Right. But that was about it. And then the other thing that was funny is your relationship with the press changes almost immediately. Before that point, I could be the young and enterprising and creative city councilman, right? Like everybody thought you were cool and the next best thing. But when you're the dog who catches up with a car, they're just kind of like, all right, what you going to do to fix this? Right. And I'm like, what do I have to do with this thing that they messed up in 1985? But you start coming up with answers, and that's kind of the gig. Right. You start, you become the kind of like a target. No? That's right. Absolutely, you do. So, and the hardest thing for me, if we were to expand that first day to the first year, my first year in office, so August 1, 2019, I become mayor. About 2 weeks later, I remember I'm at Chiefs training camp. I go every summer, but I get to talk to the players, which growing up as a Chiefs fan, I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing next to all these dudes, right? I remember talking to Patrick Mahomes, and I was just like, yo, man, it'd be good if y'all won a Super Bowl this year for Kansas City. It really would be fun. And he was like, yeah, I think we can do that. And then they did. And so I still remember I'm sitting in February of 2020, Chiefs parade, great celebration. I get to speak there. I'm just like, this is the best job in the history of time. Yep. And then, of course, in 2020, you get COVID, you get protests, and then, fast forward to like August 1 of 2020, I got people trying to recall me. I got everybody's just mad. Everybody's just mad and hot. And I was like, this has been a year. It's been quite a job. Yeah. And I can imagine, because I was going to mention that. I was like, so as the first day, right? Like there's no, I'm sure there's no like, I was wondering like, do you bring your box and your computer and set up your computer and everything, right? And but then COVID hits just a few months after you take in. And obviously there's no guideline for that, right? Like no in the war. Nobody knows how to handle it. It's little minimal information about it. But at the end, you even get national recognition of how the city was handling the situation. So, how do you do it? How do you manage to deal with that situation, and where there was no guidelines or any other advice, so nobody knew how to shut down a city? There were a lot of different challenges. And first, I want to thank the people of Kansas City. we all see the haters on social media. You may hear and know the haters in your own life, but most people were like, hey, we're going to get through this and we'll get through this together. And most people treat you with respect. And so that was, I think, how we did step one. Step two for me was my loved ones. You know, my now wife and I, she was not my wife then. We started like taking hikes. The amazing thing about the COVID era was all of us learned about the nature around Kansas City. Right. Great hiking trail in Swope Park if you haven't been, like in all types of other spots. And so, you know, she helped me through. But the other thing was I stopped being as much of a people pleaser. I think before that point I was worried about, you get scared of your own shadow. And I was always tracking where the hostility was and the negativity. I am someone who reads the anonymous online comments. It's a terrible trait, but, I was. And, you let them kind of get in your head. Yep. COVID, there was so much volume and so many people were mad at us, people who live far outside of Kansas City. They were like 4 hours away in southern Missouri and were just like, I hate what Mayor Q done did, right? But, it was still the sort of thing that said, well, look, I'm going to try to do what I think is important, and that's save lives. And then I'm going to close my computer, I'm going to turn off my phone. And I still remember a distinct time in that apartment at 18th and Vine. I had this tiny balcony, and I overlooked the KCATA bus depot. But like I had good sunsets in the skyline of the city. And was drinking like a glass of wine or something, sitting back on my old chair and just being like, you know what, it's all good. And I actually would take pictures of sunsets. It was kind of my thing. And that's how you can kind of find your way through.
Yeah. So this is another question, kind of like how do you relax?
Yeah, I mean, I used to relax before the kids, so I try to. I used to be really good at running, so I have the distinct honor. Our new Jackson County prosecutor, Melissa Johnson, is a like track star. Right. Okay. She won all these state titles and all of that. I made it to state track and field here in Missouri, and I came in last in the 200 meters. But only one person could, right? I made it. Made it. So as I got older, of course, I don't sprint like I used to because I'd pull like every muscle, but I liked running. Okay. And before I was mayor, I used to run a lot. I was doing like 5 miles a day. I was I was a little too skinny, all that sort of stuff. I don't have that affliction now, but I'm trying to get back into running. That's usually the thing that helps me get my head right, lets me get my thoughts in the morning, and frankly helps you build some good community too.
Right. What's in your playlist?
So I used to not even have an answer to that, but I have been listening to Kendrick Lamar lately because I had to drive to Texas recently and pick up my mom.
I saw that tweet.
Yeah, man, and that's a ride. Texas is not close. Texas is not Olathe.
Right.
Because I think I got to Arkansas and I'm like, am I done yet? No, I'm not. So listen to his whole, I don't even know if you call them now, albums, records, CDs, but listen to the whole thing he released. Which, he's a little stronger in language than I might typically be, but I enjoyed that. And so that's on for me, in addition to kid songs. But, the funny thing is I always liked early 90s hip hop, probably because that's when I started listening to it. So I'm trying to like make my kids listen to some real, actually early 90s, late 80s. And so we're working on that.
Yeah. Do you ever listen to some music in Spanish? Some
reggaeton? I loved reggaeton at a certain point I still like it. But I was really into it circa 2008, 2009. And, I went to, in Miami, Calle Ocho, once. And I'd love to go back, but now I feel like they'd be like, Q, get your old self out of here. If I'm there, just kind of like, I can dance a kuduro.
You know, Daddy Yankee.
I was down with all of it, right? Yeah. But now I'm scared I'll get myself in trouble. Although,
I think with your Spanish, you can go through.
Well, the Colombian Cultural Association does their big event every summer. Sean, and I always love that because Sean will get me not just dancing for a minute, Because when you're, and I say this with love to all communities, but when you're in the Latino community, like, just let me tell you about politics. Some communities you can go in and you dance real quick and you do a jig. You're like, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. It's Irish Fest. Like Colombian Cultural Festival and most others, like I'm dancing for like 40 minutes.
Yeah, Sean is like, keep going.
Somebody
keep going.
else is grabbing me. I'm here like doing more stuff than I ever knew. And then actually when I see the videos later, I'm usually like, I'm not bad. Not as bad as I thought.
Yep, no, not bad. I've been there and I've seen you. So yeah.
So do I get to see you dance at those?
I don't think you haven't. Not yet, but
Next year.
Yeah,
this year we'll get it done.
this year we'll do it. But so going back to like becoming a mayor and dealing with a situation like COVID, how would you describe or define your leadership style?
I think that we were decisive. I think we needed to be. And I think that I stuck to what was our North Star, which was to save lives. And one of the more interesting moments, and I need to just write a book about this. I don't know who would read it besides you and my mom, but that's two.
I'm sure there's a lot more.
There's this giant table at City Hall in the city manager's office. And the interesting thing was our city manager of Kansas City had retired at the beginning of my mayoral term, which meant we had an acting gentleman who was perfectly fine, but there was kind of a bit of a power vacuum then. So at this meeting, there's the police chief, the fire chief, the health director, the airport director, all these people, mainly men at the time, with these incredibly strong personalities who had very different views of what should be done. And I am, at that point, 34 years old, which, is young for that position. I was the youngest mayor in like 115 years. Yeah. And and I'm just here kind of like, all right, this is what we'll do. And I'll listen to the two sides or the 8 sides. And, we had to make a decision. We had to stick with it. We had to share it with the public. We had to sell it. And then I had to move on. And so I thought it was decisive. And I've tried to be so since.
Yeah. And so you mentioned 34, which is impressive. I'm 35 and I can only imagine myself being a mayor of a city. So, and this podcast, I always like to ask and mention like the importance of mentorship and having mentors and or talking to people that can give you advice. And I'm sure that when you become a mayor at 34 years old of Kansas City, do you remember any person or like or anybody that give you an advice or who were those people that with maybe a little bit more of experience, and how did that help you to navigate until now still?
Yeah, I have always loved and respected listening to my elders in terms of what they have to share and do. So the advice I got wasn't from necessarily another mayor. Although I do want to give a shout out to the late Charles Wheeler, who was mayor in this city, who would give a lot of thoughts and all that. He'd been the mayor in the 70s. And Congressman, former Mayor Cleaver, every now and then would let me know that, some of these same folks have been saying the same thing for the last 30, 40 years. And so that was always fun. But, I had a few people I listened to. There was an old political consultant guy by the name of Steve Glorioso, who helped me on both my campaigns at that point, city council and mayor, and or I think city council at least, I'll say, because he died before I became mayor, but was a great guy. And I still remember the last time I ever talked to him, there was an event at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum at 18th and Vine, and he lived over on 18th and Baltimore in the Crossroads. And, he was walking. And I said, well, let me walk with you. And he said, you have nothing to do? I'm like, man, I'm single and like 32, so yeah, I'll walk with you. And we talked about a lot of things. He talked about being clear on your narrative and what you're trying to share, being decisive. And he probably died about a week and a half later. And, I think the perspective I've always gotten from that is you want to take the opportunities you have to listen to the people. They don't have to be old. They don't have to be senior to you in a position, but anybody who I think has good pointers along the way, it's worth listening. And I've been blessed that I listened to a lot of those folks over the years who I think have helped me be who I am today.
Yeah. I think I always say, and try to share with a younger generation that like the importance of like because people sometimes think that a mentor is somebody that you make a meeting and make a call and stuff. But no, sometimes it's just listen to people around you.
Right. If I can like waste too much of your time, I know you guys have some time limit on this, but what the hell?
You have time limit.
But I had, when I ran for office, I got connected with this guy named Pat Gray, old Irish guy. And he would, to your point, there were many things that, maybe weren't great about Pat. He liked to start drinking scotch at about 1:30 p.m. He was smoking a pack of cigarettes, and I still remember, and I know this is a family show, when I first sat down with him, he was like, so what's your story? Like, where'd you go to school? Did you go to Rockhurst High School? I said, I did not. And he's like, that's going to kill you in Brookside. And then did all this other stuff. And I said, well, Pat, why are you in politics? And he said, I don't like politics. I hated it since they shot Bobby Kennedy in '68. And I was just like, but we would get past all those stories. And then eventually, you would get kind of the why he was there, or the people to talk to, or like the OGs of somewhere that you really needed to get to know. And, I think that's why I've been successful, frankly. Because I got a chance to talk to a lot of those people. I got to talk to Lali Garcia while she was still alive. I got to talk to a whole bunch of folks who were different than me, some similar, but all of whom had something to share. And I would think for anybody out there who's looking to find their way, if it's politics, if it's business, if it's marketing, if it's who knows what, football, visit with people in that space. And sometimes shut the hell up, right? I mean, it's odd that I'm a guy who's just talked for the last 45 minutes saying that, but you can learn so much from listening to them.
Right.
Sometimes I'll have young people who will come to me and say, hi, my name is whatever. I want you to mentor me. I want this, that, and the other. I have this plan, all of that. I'm like, whoa, you got to slow down.
Right.
And you need to actually just learn first and let, in some way, your ambition is important, but also let life help share with you where to go.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so true and so important, because I think some of the younger generations right now, with everything, all the noise and social media and everything, is like, you have to have your life figured out and do a plan and do this by 23 and then it's just like, in my personal experience, like you say, like it's just getting to know other people, listening. Some advice are gonna be good, some advice are not gonna be. They're not gonna apply, right? But definitely be open to other perspectives.
Right. To that point, right? Yeah, because so many people want to have arrived without doing any work, or at least that much work.
Right.
And I think being in politics and elected office is just constant humbling, right? People think it's actually a cool job. They're like, that guy's at the Super Bowl. I'm like, don't worry, I get kicked in the shins every day for it. But what I've gotten this great humble pie from in politics. So I was elected young. Wow, you're a rising star, all of that. There's always somebody younger, right? If I go to I will be going to the U.S. Conference of Mayors in a week, and all these new mayors, all these new people, all these kind of new folks. And rather than me being in a race to accomplish who knows what, I think this has allowed me to be like, all right, what is it that I'm trying to do? My goal isn't that by this age I need to be here. It's instead, for me, I need to take this opportunity to have done good by doing this. Right. So I motivate myself that way. It isn't, I'm 40 years old. It isn't by 45 I need to be sitting in the United States Senate. It's instead that, by the time I'm done being mayor, which I will be at 42, it is I need to actually have, built a few thousand units of housing for people in Kansas City. And that's what gives me some real hope.
Right. Make a difference. Have a legacy.
That's right.
Right.
A legacy project to leave behind. Yeah.
So talking about mentors and all that, what would be your advice for people, especially from diverse communities that want to go into public service?
Mm-hmm. A few different things. One, and I don't mean this to ever limit anyone, have all the friends you want in the world. You can have whatever community you want, but affinity organizations of people in your group or background are vastly more helpful than you might ever imagine. I'll give a few examples. It doesn't even have to be your background. When I first moved back to Kansas City, there are different associations for lawyers kind of based on demographics, but I had a very good Asian friend. And I would go to the Asian, actually it wasn't even a bar association, it was the Asian Business Association of Kansas City. And it was a great place for young Asian American Kansas Cityans to find fellowship and support. And I was just there because I wanted to do meet people and do karaoke and all that other stuff. But find groups like that. Find a small group that can be helpful to you and additive, because so many of them, as you know well, are doing the work to invite the mayor, invite the president of the chamber, invite business leaders to be there. And that's a good way that you can kind of get on with folks. The other thing I would encourage you to do, and something that helped me, find peers with you and find honest peers. I'm going to say, and it'll sound negative, but I don't mean it that way. How much people lie, right? The worst thing about social media, and I'm a parent of young kids, and don't get me wrong, I love my children, they're beautiful, all that sort of stuff. But you see all these perfect people, right? Like, oh, our kids are out sledding, and they have like this snowsuit, there's no snot on them, they're like all of this. It's just like, wow, they're just fabulous. Meanwhile, I was just trying to like get my son to put pants on all snow day Sunday, right? Talk to people who are real about the challenges, about the opportunities that exist. And I think that's something that's very important in business and politics too, because you'll hear from the successes all the time. And it'll be like, oh, this person did this, this, and this. What you want to hear is from people who say, this was a real challenge. And even in my political trajectory, I had some setbacks, many of which were entirely self-inflicted. And would love to talk to people about, hey, this is how you persevere and all of that. Find those real chats with your peer groups. Find that affinity group that can help you get somewhere, and you'd be amazed how much you can take off, and frankly, how many fans you have along the way.
Right. Yeah. I think, like you say, a lot of the people only see the top of the iceberg.
That's right.
And they don't see what's everything that happened before and under to get to that point.
That's right.
And people focus too much
I'm just on the final result, but no
on just all the hard work that had to, maybe months, years, weeks, whatever. And like you say, like being the mayor, being at the Super Bowl, but I'm sure, everything, we've seen everything that, like you say, the haters and everything that goes on social media and everything. And I'm sure every day you have something new coming up.
That's right.
So I know that here the production are telling us that you have to leave soon. So
that's right.
Yeah. I thought but okay, I'm gonna go. You say social media. You mentioned social media, and I mentioned this to you before. I consider you, and not use me, but a lot of people in Kansas City and working in marketing, a social media guru of Kansas City. You are. I think you are incredible how you manage your social media accounts. You're funny, you're creative, but also. Also, it has work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it has helped you connecting with the community and using social media for a good way. First, a lot of people ask this: do you manage your accounts?
So I manage. If you follow Mayor Q on X/Twitter, that is exclusively me. Instagram is just me. I have a Facebook that's just that Facebook you probably follow is just me, and LinkedIn is just me. I have staff that helps with the account Mayor Quinton Lucas, which 35,000 people follow, 109,000 follow Mayor Q. So there's always been a healthy competition with me and my staff on it.
I know that you always try to help them, like resharing.
Yes.
So, exactly. You always like, okay, guys, I'm gonna help
that's
you.
Nice. That's nice.
Let me reshare that. But, do you think social media has played a major role in your career?
Yes. It has played a huge role in being able to tell my story. I think from when I got into politics in 2015, really 2014 to today, so over those 11 years, we continue to see some trends, for better or worse, that are shifting, right? The newspaper's role as a paper of record to tell us what to believe and what to think and who to know has continued to decline. I think you have seen more people, including older people, who have adopted social media as a normal way that they get information, including Facebook, mainly for our slightly older crowd. But nonetheless, right, you have that. And I think that the importance of images and the images that you're sharing is key. And so it has, I think, played a key part in my success because everybody can talk to me. Right. And that's why, what I have to say, when I first got in the game, there were a lot of people who said, oh, your social media should do this, this, and this. You should delete everything every few months. You should play all these, this shtick. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the Quinton Lucas, what do you know him to do? The guy's going to have a take on the Chiefs game, so you almost may go to him for that, right? He's going to maybe provide you some interesting information about the city, 1 out of every 15 tweets. But then also, right, he is going to share with you some level of personality. Right. And I think that has been important throughout the way. And, I'll just give one example. When you have a staff hire to announce. You can write a fancy press release. We do that too, because everybody needs it. But something that I've seen over the years is actually just a picture, right? Just a picture of someone. A picture of someone, and then, whatever, you let people know, hey, Luis Padilla has joined us, is this or that or the other. And then what I have loved is usually when I live in the comments, people are like, I love that guy. Hey, congrats, Luis. I know him. He, and then they start to feel that connection with you.
Right.
And then that becomes a connection with my office. And that's what I want. I don't just want like Office of Mayor Quinton Lucas of Kansas City, Missouri announces, like, after you get through all that crud, it's lost.
Yeah.
And so that's, some of the voice we try to get out through the social media side of things.
Yeah. And I think it's key that you are, like you say, like genuine and real, and social media is for that, to make real connections, and you and your office feels close and create this engagement with the community.
And to let you know how much I think about it, probably to the annoyance of my wife, who's sometimes like, get off of that. Why are you fighting, random dude 803? And that's something I've matured on. You ain't got to fight the haters all the time. Let it go. But a few days ago, I was thinking about, what is my social media after I'm out of office? And I was like, I don't want to be too much in the city's business all the time. But I'm like, but maybe there'll be a few shticks that I keep around. And so I think it is an important part of who we are.
It is. Well, if you want to come to Fresco Marketing.
Oh my God.
You're great at social media. So
y'all got jobs? Y'all got jobs? I have a resume that's ready.
But jokes aside, but I think I love the Sundays live that you do sometimes. I think they're great. Fun. And but you have accomplished so much. What are you most proud of?
That's, there's a lot to that. I mean, I'm obviously proud of my children. That being said, I think a lot of people should be proud of their families. So you're probably asking something unique. And what I would think I'm probably the proudest of, and this is going to sound so large and amorphous, but I'm proud of where Kansas City is today. I ran for mayor on this view that we could pay our city workers more, including the people who stand on the back of garbage trucks, the people who are working hard and struggling each and every day, and who've been at the city sometimes for decades. Ran on the fact that we could build affordable housing for people. Not enough, don't get me wrong, and a lot of people who are still in need. But you could do that, and you could still have a city that's growing and rising. Super Bowls, World Cups, great economic development, light well building, all of that. And so what I'm proudest of is I think that we have shown a template to the country, if not the world, that you can walk and chew gum. You can have a city that cares about the people, including those whose lot in life it has been to struggle, but also have a city that is growing, that is dynamic, that people are envious of. And I hope to keep that going long term.
Yeah. I'm sure you will. You're working, and the whole city is working towards that goal. So we have the production is telling us we have 3 minutes. So I'm just going to say, is there anything left on your bucket list?
I mean, look, and I'll make this promise to you, because the Telemundo channel was in my office interviewing me, and he started the interview in Spanish, and I did okay for 2 minutes. I want to repair my Spanish such that I am back to a strong, almost fluent skill. I mean, always as a non-native speaker, obviously, but get that. So I think a year from now, I want to come back on the show and do this interview in Spanish.
Let's do it in Spanish.
Let's do that challenge.
That's a promise.
That's
okay.
Oh, Dios mío.
Vas a estar bien. Vas a estar bien.
Absolutamente. So I want to do that. I think on a kind of similar note, I think Kansas City needs to continue to be more hospitable to new people, be they immigrants, be they people who are just moving from another city. We are a great city. I think sometimes it can still be hard to break in, particularly when I look at the business crowd and sometimes in government. You don't have to have a father or a grandma or an auntie who knew everybody to do something. Right. And so I think we need to continue to build that. I think our schools, we need to be realistic about the number of new families, immigrant families, and others that we have coming here. And so probably in my future years, I'm really concerned with and intentional about how can we make it so every person who is present in Kansas City today can have great success. That's what it means to me to be a welcoming city. And so that is a huge goal of mine over the years ahead.
Yeah, and I know that you've been supporting the initiative Welcoming KC, which I sit in the commission, and yeah, we appreciate all your support, and definitely, yes, there's some work to do on Kansas City, but Kansas City is a very welcoming city, so yeah,
absolutely
I appreciate that. And just to end this show, if you have the opportunity to go back and see Quinton Lucas at the age of 12, 15 years old, living with your mom and your sisters, what would you tell them?
Oh, God, a lot. Don't freak out. The Chiefs will be okay. We promise. One day they will make it while you're like just sulking. I think the other thing that I would say is don't take yourself so serious. I was a serious boy. Particularly when I was younger than that. And part of that came from, some of the struggle we knew, right? If mama didn't have any money, then you knew that, things would be tough for a little while. But I think I would say your hard work will pay off and that life has a way of working out. So smile a little bit more. And I think, hopefully all of us would tell that to ourselves. And don't even get me started on what I would tell 20-year-old me. Like, take your shot, man. Shoot your shot. But anyway, that's a different thing.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Mayor. I appreciate your time. I know that I hope that you enjoy. I enjoyed it a lot. And well, we have episode 2 coming up in Spanish. So
I cannot wait.
Yeah. But I appreciate everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Mayor Quinton Lucas. And I'll see you next episode. Thank you.
Hasta luego.
Hasta adiós.
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 Arvest Bank is a proud sponsor for today's Fresco El Podcast.